Hello viewers and welcome to my new video. Today's video is going to be about mixing a reggae song. So I'm just going to give you a bit of a background to this. One of the people I know, he's actually currently putting a band together. He's a songwriter and the band is called Big Bad Cat. And at the time of me publishing this video, I think that single will be already out. It will be released, I believe, on SoundCloud and on YouTube as well. So if you look for Big Bad Cat on SoundCloud or YouTube, you will actually be able to hear the entire mastered song that has been mixed and mastered by me. So in today's episode, I thought that it would be helpful to some of you who are perhaps working on your own mixes at the moment. You might be working on a similar style of music. You might be working on a reggae mix or something similar, and you might want to see and hear what I've done actually to this particular mix. So I'm just going to take you through the journey and through the whole project. So before I start as well, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the approach that I took. So basically, Vilas, the songwriter, he effectively was recording multiple parts and actually had some other people record stuff for him. I think he had a drummer in the studio who recorded live drums for him, and then I think he himself did the bass, the guitar, the piano, and the organ and the flute. So it was actually a multi-instrumentalist, I would say, himself. And he was able to record all these parts, and then also at the end of that he got a singer who was actually a female singer for this particular track. So those are this is the background of the entire operation, if you like, and also the way in which I mixed this particular track is I would receive separate tracks from Vilas. So effectively, because the deadline for the project was quite tight, and he didn't have all the stems, all the tracks recorded yet at the time when we spoke initially. So I effectively asked him to send me everything that he's recorded, to kind of send to me straight away so that I could start working on my mix. And the way I like to do my mixes is sort of bottom up approach anyway. So I always like to start from the drums, then add the bass, then add any other instruments like guitars and things like that, and then vocal kind of at the end, making sure that it all gels together and is well balanced. But ultimately, that's how I approach it. I know that some people sort of start the other way around. They start from, say, vocals and then kind of go over everything else. But that's not really my style, at least not at the moment. Okay, so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go into the project and I'm going to share my screen with you, and I'm just going to show you what I've done. So let me put my headphones on and get to it. So I will just open my project here in my DAW, and you will be able to hear what it is. So that, like I said, so I may have already said this or not, but effectively the song is called Can't Make This Right. Okay, so again, look for that on SoundCloud or YouTube. So let me start from actually playing to you the actual song, or at least a proportion of a song, so you get sort of the vibe of what it actually sounds like as a whole project. Let me just rewind that. Let me just double check where it actually starts. Okay.
back for you to stay with me, back and praying, back for you to stay. But I know that you just don't want to. I said what could have been, what would have been, I broke my promises. I said what could have been, what would have been, I broke my promise, broke the thing that meant so much to you. I trust is gone, shattered in the night, treated you wrong, so wrong. Could we make this right? Shouldn't be so much before you went.
All right, so you get the gist of it, I think, from what I've played. So effectively, you've got an intro. The song starts from an intro, and then it gets into that kind of loopy rhythm, if you like. And actually, the name of the project is loops, because there's quite a lot of things looped, kind of, or sort of patterns that repeat themselves. Over and over, like the bass line and the guitar chords and the piano chords and so on and so forth, right? So firstly, let me actually start from the drums, and I will show you, maybe I will explain to you what I've actually received initially. All right, so we've got a separate mic for a kick drum, a separate mic for the snare drum, and then we've got two overheads, left and right, and on top of that we've also got a room mic. Okay, so I'm just going to play you the drums first without any processing other than the volume, which obviously will be how I've now done it, but let's just listen to it. All right, so let's start from the actual bass drum first, and I will explain to you what I've done with that bass drum. So let's start from this. First thing that you can hear is, I'm just gonna turn it up here on my computer. First thing is here is that you can hear there's a lot of bleed. There's a bleed from the actual hi-hat, but there's also a bleed from metronome on this one. So first thing, if I just show you what I've done here, is effectively apply the noise gate. Right, so can you hear? Straight away all the other noise is completely eliminated, so that obviously ensures that I have complete control over any other processing that happens to this, and again, it doesn't clog up anything else. Okay, there was one snare hit that got through, but effectively I didn't want to overdo the noise gate, because you can do that sometimes, because you don't want to kind of cut all the transients that should be there, right? Second thing on this, what I've done is I should be on this really. So this is my noise gate kind of setting here. Then I've got my compressor second. So if I just add that compressor, what you get with that compressor is a lot more consistency with the bass drum. You can hear straight away that it's a lot more punchy. It's a lot more kind of well, consistent, I suppose, in volume as well, you know, and kind of has that presence. All right. So then after that, we're going to the EQ settings. So let me just explain from the beginning. So this first EQ here, I'm just going to engage it. So firstly, what you've got is the high pass filter, and everything that you always have to make that decision for yourself in terms of how much you're going to cut from the low end, and you should ensure that the bass and the kick do not compete with each other in that low end. And in reggae music in particular, the bass guitar is considered to be providing that low end in the song versus the kick. So in this particular example, I cut the kick quite high to make room for the bass drum to actually feel that bottom end. Okay, so this is actually high pass filter used on this is at 60 hertz. Then we've got the small cut at around 120 hertz, and then we've got a boost at about 4000 hertz to add that extra air to the kick. And then we've got another cut at about 260 hertz. So effectively that's kind of what it does without it. Yeah, so you can hear that this is adding that kind of oomph to the sound, to the actual kick. The next one here is just a very small cut at around 66. Actually, there was some annoying frequency in that range, which I removed. And then I've also done a further cut, to be honest. I'm just going to show you this now, which is basically at around 376 hertz. So let me just apply that. So that just provides that extra kind of that feeling of the kick actually pushing the air. And the last thing that I've applied to the kick itself is actually a bit of a reverb. So I'm just going to demonstrate what it actually does. So it just adds that extra air push, like I said before. So this is the actual kick. Let's move on to the snare drum. Alright, so what the snare drum has is a little bit of a noise gate, because again, what you can hear is basically hi-hat. Hi-hat bleed is constantly going there. And actually, you can hear the metronome going as well. So if I just show you what I've done here. Yeah, it's completely removed basically. So all I get is those snare hits, nothing else. Okay, so the next thing for me was to apply compression. And the last thing that I've done here, I haven't applied any EQ. I thought the snare sounded really good actually when I was checking things. And then the last thing that I've applied is just a slight tiny bit of delay, just to make it that kind of reggae sounding snare in the in the actual mix. Okay, so that's the snare. Now the next thing to note is the overheads. So again, if I just play this right overhead first, and just show you what I've done here. Compression. Unfortunately, I couldn't have removed the actual sound of the metronome from here, because effectively I would be cutting out what essentially is the sound collected by the overhead microphone, but I just had to live with that for this particular mix. So if I just demonstrate to you what I've done in terms of the EQing, there's a couple of things here. First thing is just cutting a little bit of that low end again. And the second thing, and then there's some other subtractive EQ in some of the areas that were kind of really not desired in the mix itself. And then from here I've also applied a bit of a high shelf basically here, just to add a bit of more sort of air to the actual cymbals element, because effectively what we're getting here mainly from the overhead is the hi-hat, because there isn't really any other cymbals being hit. So if I add that, you can hear it, right? And the same goes for the left overhead. Same settings have been applied. Okay, and the last thing that I've got here is that room mic effectively, and the room mic is effectively just a replica. I think I've applied the same settings to this because effectively it made sense. There wasn't any okay, so if I now play you the overall drum kit, the tambourine I haven't explained. So the tambourine itself at number 12, first you've got a bit of a noise gate on it, Then we've got the compressor. EQ. As you can see, there isn't really that much going on in terms of anything below 1000 Hertz really. So I've cut all that out because it wasn't needed. It's got really sort of high mid-range to sort of high frequency. And just cut some of these stuff annoying characteristics of that I didn't want to hear. And then I also added a little bit of a high shelf on it, and just to add the air, whilst also cutting a little bit of the actual. I think it's at about 1700 Hertz, something like that. But there was some annoying hiss, I think, on that one, so I cut it out. All right. So these are our drums so far. So what we need to do now is introduce the bass into the equation. Right, okay. So let's listen to the bass, the main bass groove. Okay, so the bass is at number 13, so let me just double check this. Let me actually just play the bass on its own so that you can hear the just the bass. First thing is just a very gentle noise gate. Second thing, which is a very important part of this work, is a compressor. Because this does a very important job for the bass, because it's kind of puts it in a lot more of a consistent place really. Okay, then what we've got is high pass filter at 50 Hertz. So let me just. There's quite a bit of a cut here also at 222 Hertz, and then we've got a boost at 80 Hertz, so that's your fundamental bass frequency, and then a little bit of a boost at 400 Hertz. Next, what I always like to do with the bass is where it sort of doesn't belong, on the other side of the spectrum, so 5K. Effectively, I just remove completely through a low pass filter. Next, what I've done, there were just a couple of things that I didn't like, which I effectively removed by using some subtractive EQ. And this last one actually isn't used, it was just something I was experimenting with. So effectively, this is the sound of the bass that you get. And that's in the full mix. But what I also wanted to show you is that actually this bass, at the moment that it arrived to me to be mixed, just wanted to demonstrate how low this bass actually was, and I think you could hear it at the very beginning. I will just deselect all these plugins again. Even say if I engage an EQ, just look. Basically, as Vilas was recording this bass, he cut all the treble from it practically. It's just, there's practically no treble here. It kind of ends at 500 hertz, that's it. So it was a very, very, very low end bass, as you can see. It's almost off the charts, as if you can see it here. It's kind of going over, the range of human hearing, so that's pretty interesting in itself. But effectively, I'm just gonna, and that's why I had to cut it as well, sort of the high pass, use a high pass filter on it. Okay.
Make this right. Shouldn't be so much with.
The next thing from here are three particular elements that are sort of, they actually provide the extra rhythm to the song because it's a reggae song, and those are the piano, the guitar, and also the organ that has been recorded here and submitted for the mix. Alright, so let me start from this main groove here on the piano. Just a gentle noise gate on it. Compressor. And again, it's already pretty consistent, but it's just to make sure that it's got that level of consistency in terms of the attack. Okay, then we've got the EQ. So this is what I've done actually. I've cut everything below 100 Hz. And then I've actually boosted this area, this mid-range area here, that the low mid-range at 300. And I've also done two cuts at 617 and then 939. I by just using the swiping technique, I basically found that there was some frequencies there that were non-desirable in the mix, basically. And the last thing, and I've actually done some more subtractive EQing here. If I just engage this last, it's 309, and then also at about just over 1000 Hz as well. And I've also done a cut, as you can see, that this piano doesn't really even stretch as far as 1000 Hz, so I've got it cut at that. So effectively low pass filter used for that. Okay, so there's not that much other than that boost here at 300. That's it really in terms of helping the sound. I thought the sound was pretty good actually as it came, already recorded. So that's the piano. The second thing here we've got is the guitar. All right, so let's move on to the guitar. Again, the guitar tone, actually, the way that it came, I was pretty happy with it. I don't think that I've done that much to it, but let's just go over it. So firstly, we got the bare guitar sound, sort of dry as it came recorded. I actually haven't used any noise gate on this one. Just a bit of compression. Further to that, again, it's always a bit of a trade-off. So you can see where this guitar sort of leaves in the frequency range, and it's, you know, it's also quite low actually. It occupies quite low territory, but it doesn't go any lower than 100 hertz anyway. So I've cut everything below that. And there was something annoying in this frequency here at 217, so I cut it right down, whilst also boosting the 300, because I thought that kind of, there was the fundamental, I think here that is, you can kind of see where it was kind of sitting. And then I cut it again at 1000 hertz. The other EQ is just a subtractive EQ. Again, you can see what I've done here. I just removed some of these frequencies that I thought were causing problems, basically, in the mix. So just cleaning that guitar up, really, just to make sure that there's nothing like piercing through too much and that kind of thing. Okay. So when you listen to it together with the piano, they sound quite nice together. I think they go really well. They go really together. And by the way, in terms of the panning, because I never actually said anything about the panning, these are actually panned all the way to the left and right, you know, so guitar is on one side and the piano is on the other side. In this particular mix, I didn't have an opportunity to effectively, I didn't have two guitar tracks. So I couldn't have used that technique where you kind of pan one guitar to the left, one guitar to the right, and then maybe try and maybe experiment with the piano more sort of in the middle or maybe spread, but not all the way to one side. But anyway, this has worked really well for this particular mix. Okay, so the next thing that we've got here is our organ. So I actually received one single track of organ. But I've done a bit of a trick here, and the reason for that is because I thought that the organ needed to be sort of in to a listener. I thought that the organ had to kind of come in the same sort of place in a stereo spectrum, but at the same time I didn't just want to place it right bang in the middle with the bass, because I thought that would just be clashing with the bass. So the reason for So effectively what I decided to do is I've actually copied, as you can see here, I've copied the organ track, and I've panned it. So what we've got here is number 18 and 19. So you can see I've actually panned these slightly left and right, so like 15% left and 15% right, and that way effectively I've achieved that separation from the actual bass guitar. Okay, so let me just show you. Actually, I'm gonna play you that organ. Let me just firstly, before I do that, I'm just gonna untick everything that was already on it. Right, so you can hear that organ actually kind of goes a bit more of like it's like almost like a ska rhythm rather than reggae per se. You know, it's kind of like you know, it kind of goes over that kind of like more skanking kind of vibe. Okay, and actually there was a bit of a conversation about this with Vilas as well, because you know, he wanted it really quiet in the mix, and I think initially I did it quite louder than what he wanted, even though it was already quieter than the piano and the guitar. But obviously after you know, we had some conversations and came to, I've basically agreed to turn it, you know, right down. So effectively, because it was clashing a little bit with the piano itself, you know. So effectively, so this organ just really sits kind of in the background, in the mix. So let me just explain what I've done in terms of the actual approach. So if I just play you channel 18, let me just double check something. Have I not done something here? Oh, I didn't engage the piano signal back. So number 18, let's go back to that and just play it. Initially, you can see that the volume is kind of jumping up and down. So by applying this compressor, effectively sort of evens it out. I've done some subtractive EQ. Let me just show you where that actually sits. Again, I didn't want this organ to be competing with the bass and the bass drum in the lower frequency range. So I cut everything below 90. So it's a bit wider in the low end than the guitar and the piano, but it's not as wide as the actual kick drum and the bass. And I made a cut here at 520, and also I made a cut at about 4,300 hertz. And then the last thing that I've done here is I cut everything down at 5,000 hertz through a low pass filter. The last thing that I did was just a little cut at 129 hertz. Again, there was some frequency that didn't kind of add to the overall tone of the organ. So if I just play them together now. So you can hear that it's really kind of in the background at the moment. Okay, the last thing on this mix is a flute. So I'm just going to show you how that flute is effectively done. Let me just find it. So again, this is something that Vilas asked me to do for him. So he wanted specifically the flute to be quieter in the intro, and then sort of for the volume to kind of rise, you know, for the main part, but again not be kind of too loud. Although we did have a discussion because it's a solo instrument. Effectively, it becomes the thing that is sort of playing the melody on top of all these rhythm instruments that go underneath it. So it needs to have its own presence, and it also has a particular relationship with the vocal. So in my view, at least, it should sit sort of at a comparable level to the vocal, at least, you know. So when the vocal kind of kicks in and you have that flute playing before it, you know, because I was experimenting with various volume levels actually, and it didn't sound good when I was trying to turn that flute down, and because that way it made the vocal then really kind of jump up in the volume. It kind of sounded really weird. But I'm just going to show you what I've done in terms of that intro and how that flute is actually increasing in volume. So let me play that for you. Yeah. So what you can see as well, I'm going to show you how I actually processed this. So firstly, I did initially apply noise gate. Vilas felt after listening to the initial track that I sent to him, he felt that that noise gate was cutting some transients out. So he asked me to remove it, and that's fine. I did that. I didn't think that would be detrimental to anything. I always like to use noise gates on things because for anything that was there and went in, and sometimes I listen to those sounds closely on headphones, and any background noise, anything like that, it really the more things like this you add in your mix, the more clogged up it becomes, these things just kind of keep stacking up on top of each other, and the mix is going to become quite busy with those extra noises which you really don't want. Okay, well, in this particular example, it wasn't a big deal really to remove it. So I've got that flute intro, so let me just play you the firstly, we've got the compressor. On the EQ side, I've boosted the fundamental frequency at about 787. As you can see, I've also cut about 300 and everything below 305, 306 hertz, because there was basically nothing there anyway. There's nothing on this one, and then I also added a little bit of air to it. From about 5,000 and above. And what also, this was actually something that Vilas asked me to do for him, is to add an extra reverb to the actual track, which I have. So let me just add that reverb. So that makes the flute kind of sit a bit more kind of in the background, if you like, of the track, So that's with the full track. Okay, so that's it when it comes to that. And the last thing here, which I've processed, is the vocal. So interesting thing to say is that when Vilas was sending me these tracks, he had somebody, because he had this woman, female singer, to record his vocal, and after he actually had somebody else to edit that vocal for him, and he sent me quite a few different versions of this, but I've decided some of that was already kind of processed, so like for example, this one, wet, saturated, compressed, and reverby. So if I just compare to you the two vocals.
I beg and pray and pray and beg and beg for you to stay with me. Beg and pray and pray and beg and beg for you to stay. But I know that you just don't want to. I said what could have been, what would have been. I broke my promises. I said what could have been, what would have been. I broke my promise, broke the thing that meant so much to you.
Okay, so that was their version, and then I'm gonna play you my version.
Beg and pray and pray and beg and beg for you to stay with me. Beg and pray and pray and beg and beg for you to stay. But I know that you just don't want to. I said what could have been, what would have been. I broke my promises. I said what could have been, what would have been. I broke my promise, broke the thing that meant so much to you.
Effectively, what I've done here is I think that the vocal that was sort of processed, but of course it was kind of processed without hearing the full mix, and I was sort of doing that in relation to the full mix. I thought they did a really good job, by the way, but it was, I thought that the reverb, for example, on it wasn't really going together with everything else that was going on already. The reverb I applied to some other tracks, and I also thought that it was a bit dark and on the lower end, and especially when I was comparing to some of the reference tracks as well, I made it sound a bit more air, it sort of gave the vocal a bit more air, I think. So
Beg and pray and pray and beg and beg for you to stay with me.
Compared to,
I beg and pray and pray and beg and beg for you to stay with me. Beg and pray and pray and beg and beg for you to stay.
Yeah, if you sort of hear the difference, even though the volume
Beg
might
and
not
pray
be.
and pray and beg and beg for you to stay with me. Beg and pray and pray and beg and beg for you to stay. But I know.
Yeah.
I beg and pray and pray and beg and beg for you to stay with me. Beg and pray and pray and beg and beg for you to stay. But I know that you just.
Yeah, so effectively, you know, that was kind of my take on it, and I thought that it kind of that approach suited the mix better, in my opinion. So I've got this on channel 21. So if I just show you quickly what I've done with it. So this would be just the vocal without
anything. Beg and pray and beg and beg for you to stay with me. Beg and pray and beg and beg for you.
In fact, what I need to do in order to show you that as well is do that.
Beg and pray and beg and beg for you to stay with me. Beg and pray and beg and beg for you to stay. But I know that you just don't want to.
Right, so that's the dry vocal with nothing on it. It's been slightly edited before being sent to me for timing, things like that, but effectively there's no effects, nothing on it. First thing I did,
beg and pray and beg and beg for you to stay with me. Beg and pray and beg and beg for you to stay. But I know that you just don't want to. I said what could have been, what would have been. I broke my promises. I said what could.
Now, second thing, you can already tell that the volume of that is more consistent. It's gone up overall, but it's also more consistent through that compression. Now, the second thing I've done here is I've added my plugin, which I love for the vocals, which is my Isotope Nectar Elements. So I'm just gonna show you what that actually looks like.
Beg and pray and beg and beg for you to stay with me. Beg and pray and beg for you to stay. But I know that you just don't want to. I said what could have been, what would have.
Already some DS, some gate added to hear the space. You know, the style is the Motown style that I kind of used because that kind of sounded good for this. I really like this particular plugin. I think you can very quickly find something that is really suitable.
Beg and pray and beg and beg for you to stay with me. Beg and pray and beg and beg for you to stay. But I know you just don't want to.
That's with it. So it's already improved and made it sort of sound more professional. The next thing I did
Back and praying, back and back for you to
is
stay with
EQing.
me back.
So what we would see here, it's quite an interesting take on it. So anything below 90 cut out. I've done some subtractive stuff at 150 and 500, but then you get stuff that is emphasizing certain important frequencies, like 2000 hertz, and your 7,500, and it's got the actual high shelf starting from around 10,000. All right, so that high shelf is giving that vocal the air, it adds that air and adds that sort of high frequencies, which is what you want, because you in that mix you've got a lot of, you've got your kick, obviously you've got your snare, and you've got your especially the hi-hat, but there's no other cymbals other than one crash at the very beginning, so there isn't that much that occupies the higher end of the frequency range, so this is where the vocal you want that vocal to occupy that space, and it will bring it to the front of the mix as well, which is what you want. And it will actually, because you need something in there, so you don't want your mix to sound muddy or anything like that. Yeah. So effectively, if I apply it now,
Praying back and back for you to stay with me, back and praying back and back for you to stay, but I know,
see what I mean?
you just don't want to. I said what could have been, what would have been, I broke my promises. I said what could have been, what would have been, I broke my promise, brought that thing that meant so
I actually haven't used that reverb what I was trying here, because I will just explain that in a minute, because the reason for that is that I've applied the same for consistency's sake, majority of the instruments other than the kick, the snare and the flute go through the same reverb, so effectively it makes them sound like they are in the same room, but so let me just explain this. So this vocal,
back and back for you to stay with me, back and praying back and back for you
that's
to
the
stay, but
reverb.
I know that you just don't want to.
Yeah. And then at the very end, because again, excuse me, I had this feeling that the vocal was slightly, louder and quieter and going up and down a little bit in volume, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, because it's natural that a singer would kind of go like this in a song, but you have to be careful that those levels are kept in check, to a degree. So for that specifically, I used my Outlaw plugin, that I use to sort of even out the volume level, so effectively.
Back and praying back and back for you to stay with me,
That's
back and
with it.
praying back and back for you to stay, but I
That's
know
without it.
that you just don't want to. I said what could have been, what would have been, I broke my promises. I said what could have been, what would have been, I broke my promise, brought that thing that meant so much to you.
Right? So this is the vocal, so effectively, that's the song. That's the song mixed by me. The maybe something that I didn't mention before, but when it comes to the placement, the panning, the overheads, I've got them at 50% each side. Like I said before, the piano and the guitar are completely sort of 100% left and right. The kick, snare, flute, and the vocals are in the center, and the organ and the bass, is in the center. And the organ, as I already said, has been sort of duplicated as a track and panned sort of 15% left and 15% right, so it kind of doesn't clash with the bass guitar and the kick. And effectively, that's my mix. and I'm really happy with it, and I think that important thing was that I was what I was using throughout this was reference tracks mainly. The track that I was given was Holy Cook, Milk and Honey, and this was the track that I've also used in the mastering stage, actually, to make sure that the mastered version of this track after the mix actually sounds very comparable to that track in a ballpark, where in terms of the frequency range, and it doesn't really fundamentally, it doesn't make you think, oh my god, this is so much different, like this is like worlds apart. But actually, I think I've successfully managed to bring the two tracks very close together. So thanks very much for watching, and I hope that you've taken something out of today's video, and it will help you in your own projects if you are working on a mix. Also, if you would like me to perhaps work with your mix, and then by all means get in touch with me, and my email is always at the in video descriptions. But if you can't find it, it's bartek.creates@gmail.com. So if you would like me to mix your track, you can also get in touch with me through my email. And if you've liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you're not already subscribed to my channel, please do so. Click that subscribe button and hit that bell, so that way you will be notified every time I post a new video. I'll see you in my next video.